Q&A panel with our next duo of guests. It will be Oliver Smith and Kenneth Cranham for Hellraiser 2, and they are approaching right now. So, in advance of them arriving, would you give our guests a very big popcorn welcome? Ken Cranham and Oliver Smith. Welcome to sunny Yorkshire, or rainy Yorkshire. I don't know what the weather's like outside. Before we start, Ken, a belated congratulations on your CBE, which you were awarded in the King's Birthday Honours in June. Ken Cranham CBE.
When that actor died, it was a friend of mine, Murray Melvin. He turned down an honour because as a protest against Windrush. And I thought, well, that sounds rather good. But when it was offered me, I just thought of my dad. When I was at RADA, I got the gold medal. And I came home one day and my dad had it on the back step and he was taking a photo of it. You know, and actually I found out when he spent his entire life finding magazines with articles about me in. It became a hobby for him. And I've got to do it for him because I had him to myself after my mum died for 7 years, and we went on a lot of epic journeys together. And I did a thing in Rome. I played Pompey, and we went to Rome together overnight by train, and I had him with me for a week in Rome. And all these other guys who were in Rome, these actors I knew, they said, oh, I wish I'd done that with my dad, because women, girls often travel with their mothers, but it doesn't happen often with men. And he told me stories he'd never told me before and stuff like that. It was as if we got to know each other. And then he died in a death camp on the south coast, like my mum. You know, they both died down there. And I'm in that last stage of my life now, and I think I'm going to see him again. But then I think I'm going to see both of the dogs that I loved again. I can't believe that connection won't happen again. It's maybe naive, but there you are. It's a long answer, wasn't it?
Well, it was for services to drama, but we can also say it was services to being a great guy. So congratulations. Let's bring you down to earth and let's talk about some horror. Many years ago, Ken, 20 years ago now, I interviewed you about a movie that you'd made called Two Men Went to War.
Yeah.
And I asked you at the time about playing leading roles in film, and I made the mistake of saying to you, you haven't had many leading roles, I think this is the first, and you said no. Dr. Channard in Hellraiser 2 is a leading role.
I told him. I put him right.
You bloody did as well, yes.
Hey.
But it was a leading role, and I wanted to ask the two of you about playing horror and playing horror straight. And there's a sequence at the very beginning, almost the beginning of Hellraiser 2, where Ken, you hand Oliver a razor to remove the maggots. And it's a very credible scene because it's nasty and it's played straight. And I wanted to ask the two of you whether it's important to play horror straight for the impact that it needs.
I don't know what to say to that. You answer it.
Well, am I in? Can you hear me well? Yeah? So, I've worked with Ken a couple of occasions before. I must mention this because this isn't, oh, that's better. I've worked with Ken before on a couple of occasions, and I mention it because it's been quite a humorous situation. One can't get serious about horror for this very reason. We did a thing called El Cid together, do you remember, in Manchester? Yeah. We played some ghastly sort of some villain, and I was playing the grass. I remember I played Morris, mowed the grass, it was good. And I shocked you, and I shocked you to the cops. And to smithereens. Do you remember towards the end? Do you remember that? Blown to smithereens.
Well, that was obviously the right thing to do, wasn't it?
Right thing, yes. Then when I met you again on this, on Hellraiser 2, you had been eaten alive by a woman. And I thought, don't work with that man again, so kind of happened.
What were you eaten by?
A woman.
You were?
Yeah.
What was that in?
Hellraiser 2, maggots on TV.
Oh, I see what we were.
Yes, Julia comes back from the dead,
Yeah.
played by Deborah Joel, and
Yeah.
then we slime around on this floor for ages, and I get mounted behind in this slime on this mattress by the reborn woman. That was an exciting thing for me at the time, I tell you.
Yeah. And when we did sequences like that, the particularly horrific sequences, they did much longer versions of them for the Japanese market. They did a cut down version for the British censor, and at the same time they did a much longer, more horrid version. That rather intrigued me.
That would explain a great deal in that case. I was saying that only the other day. So intercuts with cutting maggots out of your arm can go on for so long without becoming a bit tedious. And it must have been one of those Japanese versions, I reckon, that I was watching on ITV3 or whatever it was.
It certainly sets the film up for what you're going to get. You know what I mean?
Because I didn't mean to cheapen it. The actual end product is horrific beyond belief. But I think what Ken's referring to
it's all right.
What Ken's referring to is the Japanese version. It was elongated. It was inserts occurring after the event. It was lengthened unduly from its original box set span.
It certainly packs a wallop. Ken, I wanted to ask you what it was that attracted you to playing Channard. What did you think that you could bring to the character?
What happened is, I had to choose between playing King John in Shakespeare at Stratford or Dr. Channard. And there were these antique curtains I had my eye on. And the way that the shop used to operate was let you take one of them home. And I thought, if I do Dr. Channard, I can get those curtains. And but little did I know. I mean, the actor that played King John, nobody remembers anything about it at all. But Dr. Channard, it's an accident of timing. This film has had a fantastically long life, hasn't it? You know, and years later, I was in LA with a play, and it was staff pick on VHS. And as all the formats change, I think it looks really good. People have got these wall screens now. And this was made before CGI. So the special effects and the makeup, I think, look really good on those big screens that people now have. When I was the monster, it was a 7-hour makeup. They'd send cars for me at 3 in the morning. And then you'd sit with a coffee machine and some nutter for hours on end. And when I looked like that, they wouldn't let me go to the restaurant because it put everyone off their food. So somebody would bring me something to eat, and it would always be lukewarm. And so the days when I was the doctor in my suit and everything were a great feeling of freedom. I got into a bad habit when I was the monster. I'd send them to nearby Marks and Spencer's and get some very cold Chardonnay. And I'd drink a lot of that, because very often I just had to go, just like that. You can do that easily pissed, you see.
Oliver, can I ask you, having played Skinless Frank in Hellraiser, was there an expectation that you might come back for a second movie?
Please excuse me. Am I behaving properly with this microphone? Not very good on mics.
Do you want to share? Turn that one on.
How's that? You know, I think the reason we came back for Hellraiser 2 was purely the humane effects. I think they were saying, thanks very much thanks very much for what you did in number 1. We've got you back in number 2. Not only that, in fact, I got 3 contracts in the second one. Writing on the wall, playing myself in flashback, and Mr. Browning being eaten to death. 3 separate contracts. Sorry to talk about money. it was like a little family of horror movie makers. So we were all very lucky. That's the answer to that one. Good Fortune is called. And you've got to just get it right.
And 3 great performances in one. Ken, we often hear actors talk about research. If they're asked to play a historical figure, you hear about actors reading everything that they can get their hands on. With this one, did you do research? Did you read any of Clive Barker's fiction, or was everything that you needed to do in the script?
Well, when it was offered to me, I thought, well, I better go and see Hellraiser 1. And I couldn't find anyone who wanted to see it with me. I had to go and sit there all on my own. But it's one of those films. I mean, it's not like anything else. I mean, when I was a teenager, I was obsessed by trying to see as many X films as I could when I was around about sort of 13, 14, around there. And we used to go to the cinema and turn our colours up and speak with deep voices when we were paying the money to go in. But they were sort of, sex films or horror films. And one of the advantages to being in the Air Training Corps is you went to get to stay on camp with real airmen, and you got to see X films when you weren't old enough to see them. I don't know why that was such an obsession when you were that age. But the horror films that I saw then were like sort of classical films, with Oliver Reed, sort of Technicolor, and sort of, they were rather like watching sort of Dickens or something. They weren't like Hellraiser at all. Hellraiser's something else. I don't think there's anything else like the Hellraiser films. I haven't seen, there's 9 Hellraisers or something. I've only seen 2 of them, so I don't know what happened subsequently, but I do know that endlessly one is asked to go to conventions, and it does still have a following.
Yes, it does indeed. And I haven't seen 3 either. So, I'm not out of snob, I'm not being snotty, I just haven't seen it.
You both mentioned the makeup that you went through. I wanted to ask you both to expand on that slightly, because we hear these literal horror stories of actors being caked in makeup for almost a day before they're called to the floor to act. So I wanted to ask you initially, Ken, about the extent of the makeup that you had to endure or enjoy, depending on your point of view, and Oliver, similarly for you, but Ken first.
Well, mine was a 6-7 hour makeup, and so when they did a camera test for me to have a look at it on camera, I begged them. I said, don't put me through this and then not film me, which is exactly what they did one day, and that is really depressing, because you go through all that, and then it would take 4 people an hour to get it off. And one day when I was done up as the monster, I took the wrong door out of the studio. I was suddenly in a car park, and there were people sitting in a car, and they had a dog with them, and they looked alarmed, and the dog was going barking at me. And if you play Richard III, it's in the speech, and dogs bark at me as I pass them by, and so I found out what that was like.
And Oliver, your experiences?
Yes, I was tested to, I was asked, would I mind being rubberised for Frank the Monster?
Rubberised.
I said it to him very gently. I said,
sorry.
Would you mind being rubberised? I said to him. He would have nothing to do with it. Sorry, I'm being silly.
It's nice. Yeah, rubberised and metaphor is the point. So on my face, it was straws up nose time. Teddington Studios, where you had to stay. I couldn't cope. I panicked, so I said, so we got round to this. They rubberised the entire suit for Frank the Monster. You climbed into that, the naked suit. But the face ended up being done in quarters, cheek by cheek, forehead, nose, and all that. 5 hours. It was 6 to be, whittled it down to about 3.5. And you just got used to it. He's gone with the flow. And it is Cliff Wallace was my makeup man. It was all totally brilliant. The sad bit was being abandoned at lunchtime. Everybody went onto the unit coach for lunch, and he was left with a couple of straws to suck liquid scrambled egg out of. And even worse than that was the end of the day, when it's a wrap. And you were, honestly, the only person left in the building with, what is it, a couple of makeup boys, which whittled down to one, and then 3 hours to get the bloody stuff off against it. Little balls of glue, which I stayed in Putney with a friend of mine. They kept the sheets for ages, rubberised bits of glue. So, miserable, pleasant, happy time. Makeup.
Something that you don't forget, I'm sure. Now, we're going to give one of the 3 microphones to the audience, so if you do have a question for either Oliver or Ken, just put your hand in the air and we will come to you. I'm sure that there will be questions. Ken, you alluded to this a minute ago when you said there's nothing like Hellraiser movies. Posters keep falling off behind us at any given time. They keep dropping off the wall. I know that, I don't want to say how unique was it, because unique is unique. But in terms of your career, have you done anything before or since that matches the uniqueness of Hellraiser? Is it absolutely unique in your career?
Well, it is, except that when I was in Rome, I played Pompey in Rome, and there's a sequence where he arrives in a foreign country, and a soldier from his past embraces him, and then cuts off his head. And so, twice in my life, and because I had to lose my head in Hellraiser, what Oliver's talking about, is they put stuff on your head which then congeals and contracts onto your head. It lasts about 27 minutes, but it feels much longer. And whenever they do that to you, they take you somewhere and you're sitting in some back room with an old atlas on the wall, or in a garage somewhere. It's like the sort of room where I'm sure they torture people. You think, why am I here? Oh, I see. And they do put straws up your nose for you to breathe through. And the first time it happened to me, I actually remembered as a boy reading a short story by Edgar Allan Poe called The Premature Burial, which his overriding fear was that he was going to be buried alive. He actually designed coffins with bell pushes in so he could let people know he was alive inside and stuff like that. And that's what my mind came up with. It reminded me of something I'd never thought about ever. So it's a peculiar sort of torture.
Everyone drew off. Any questions?
What happened to all the props, like all the makeup and stuff that you wore? What happens to that after the movie? What happened to all the props that you put on, like your special effects makeup? What happens to everything? What happens to...
I don't know. If someone had hung on to them, they'd be worth a fortune.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
I mean, I gave one discarded head to my brother's eldest boy, and he hid behind hedges and appeared and frightened his friends.
What about Frank's rubber suit then? What happened to that?
Which one?
Frank's rubber suit, what happened to that? The latex? What happened to it all?
It kept a couple of back for interested parties, but it just generally disintegrated so quickly. It just evaporated, whatever the word is for rubber, disintegrated in its own time. But you're quite right, whoever mentioned that first. Yeah, it would be, if you could have preserved it, I suppose. Yeah, it's one of those things, artifacts that collect value as time goes by. That they're all gone now. Yeah.
Also, when you were playing Frank in that room, did you scare the female cast members? Were they quite scared of your appearance, or did they get used to it?
But were they scared of me?
Yeah, Gloria,
No.
the female lady that you were with, was she scared?
No, we knew each other far too well. It's cool. You just
okay.
get on with the job done, and you just switch on for the minute that matters here. Sorry, I don't want to cheapen it. For attempts, had it done right, but it was a very happy event, the whole Hellraiser series. The whole thing was, as I said, a happy experience. Lovely people, hard-working people. We kept on schedule. It came out the way it did. Nobody knew what the destiny was going to be. It could have been straight to vid or straight into the bin. It wasn't. And we all got rewarded and said, asked back. Like I said earlier, you could ask back, and that's rather nice. I'm very pleased with you. was so bloody good. And smiling between takes, very important. Yes.
It was interesting that you mentioned the TV series Rome, because I remember Pompey's death, because it was in the Tide, wasn't it? You arrive expecting a hero's welcome, and then you go. I mean, is it every actor's dream to have a really chunky death scene, either on stage or telly or on film, for both of you?
A chunky death scene. I haven't really thought about it. I mean, it's just, if you think, oh, I've got to do that, whatever it is. I mean, a sword fight, whatever it is, you just get to the day and you do your best. I mean, you always. I never want to ride another horse ever again. I was in the film Maleficent, and I played King Henry, and even though my suit of armour was mainly made of plastic, I was 5 days on that horse. And even in medieval times, they didn't sit on the bloody thing for 5 days. And it was extraordinary, because that was a film with Angelina Jolie in. And one day in the studio, Tom Cruise turned up, and they met in the studio. And I thought, well, it must have been like this in ancient Spain or something, with Philip of Spain and so, you know, it was like a world that you didn't sort of know anything about. It was of another level. And in the Islington market, they say, "What's Angelina Jolie like?" I say, "Well, she's lovely." Well, I don't know, what else are you going to say? You know, it's somebody living in the same time as you, but in another sphere. Her and her husband, they bought a French chateau in the surrounding vineyards for sort of millions and millions of pounds. You were mixing with the world that you didn't really know anything about.
Just follow up on that, because your film career goes back a way. There's a handful of mega classics in there that any one of us have seen. You're in Oliver, with Oliver Reed. You're in a terrific movie called Robin and Marion, with Sean Connery and Audrey Hepburn, Robert Shaw, Nicole Williamson. Layer Cake, another good death scene in that. A question that I'd like to ask both of you is, do you reach a certain level in your career when you can choose, or do you accept the best of what you're given?
Well, you get 4 stages as an actor. You get a young career, then you get a dad career. The dad career is a good time, like with Harvey Moon, where you play somebody with children, but you still have love affairs with adult women. And then you have an old career, and things are thinning out. And then you get a deaf old tosser career. I found out that's the last stage. and when you get to that one, you're lucky to get anything at all. And I've just done something where I had 17 lines, and they said to me, "We're sorry you've only got 17 lines." I said, "No, I'm so grateful." I've got a chance of learning it, because that's what retires actors, and a lot of them are quite honest about it. They say, "Well, I've got to stop." Because, I mean, Mike Gambon has been very honest about it. He says, "The only lines I can remember is when the previous line is a question." So, you know, you end up being grateful for anything that you can get, because you're old. Is that an answer?
Oliver, I wanted to ask you about working on the first Hellraiser, and I wanted to ask about the vibe on the film. Clive had written it, he was directing it, he conceived it, it was entirely his baby. Looking back to that time when you were shooting it, did it feel special? Did it feel subversive? Did it feel groundbreaking? Or, like Ken's just said, was it a job of work? You were turning up to work.
It was really good news. Atmospherically, everything about it was. I'm talking about this place, and I'm not saying all jobs are like this, but generally jobs are. Occasionally come across, oh dear God, get me out of here, but very rarely do. Lovely atmosphere on Hellraiser from day one all the way through, I can safely say. I'm only repeating what I've already said already, so the question's really been answered, if you know what I mean. Yeah, and I'm not being patronising, it's true.
Any questions from the floor?
Thank you very much for both of you being here. Just a continuation from one of the ladies mentioned about female performers. Could you share your experiences with working with Claire Higgins and Ashley Lawrence, please?
Claire Higgins has done some of the best acting I've ever seen. I've seen her on stage be extraordinary, but she is fantastically volatile, and you don't know what you're going to get, really. I've been very lucky with her, but there are horror stories about things that have gone on and other things she's done. But like, she's not here, she's actually busy. She's a terrific actress and a very exciting character altogether. She's totally Irish, even though her speaking voice is very English. She sounds like an English actress. Believe you me, she's very Irish. Is that an answer at all? Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly what Ken said, yeah. Let's get out of that one, all right. Yes, seriously, no problem at all. Following on board from what I said just a moment ago, Claire Higgins was an absolute treat. Ken's absolutely right about her. She is an extraordinary, very talented woman. Nutty as a fruitcake, easy way around that one, but in a nice way. And that was all very pleasant working with her. Ashley was a sweetheart, no trouble at all, got on with the job. Atmospherically on that thing, the whole thing that made it go, as far as I'm personally concerned, and I think everyone would agree, the atmosphere was a welcoming one. And also, we had our magic moments of humour that you could hear in the next street when things were so funny. So one was allowed to laugh. Glorious feeling, which is very relaxing in its own way. But all good news, I'm afraid. I can't really elaborate on much about going on about these particular pictures because they were both rather nice to be part of because of the foundation.
Ken, what was your reaction when you first got the script? When you read the script for the first time, had you been given an indication of how it might be or the direction it went in? Or did you read it for the first time and think, God?
At the time it came my way, I used to see quite a lot of Gary Oldman, and I could tell that he was rather put out that a horror film had come my way. It was something he obviously wanted to do, and I'm sure the end result of it was him playing Dracula a few years later. It was something he liked the idea of, and that sort of spurred me on a bit. And also, it took me about 3 days to read King John, and I thought, I'm not going to touch this. And instead, luckily, I did Hellraiser. But just thinking about Claire, is that one time we went to a town in northern Germany, and we were the two sort of guests of honour at a horror sort of get-together, whatever you would call it. And the Cenobites, the citizens of hell, all the young people in this German town identified with the Cenobites. And they all came in costume, and they waited for me and Claire to finish signing some things because they wanted to come and sit with us. And we sat and had meals with them, and we were their king and queen. How many people can say that?
Another question about horror, playing horror. I think it was Peter Cushing years ago who said that you should respect horror when you're playing it and you should never send it up. So when you got the script for, I call him Channard, his name is Channard, thank you. But when you got the script for The Bad Doctor, were you thinking, I can have fun with this, but not to send it up? What was your approach to playing it and playing him?
Actually, what happened quite quickly is I realised I had to try and survive it, because I'd had to do these flying sequences. So I had this huge, like a roll of linoleum coming out of the top of my head, covered in herpes. And when I say they were covered in herpes, the special effects people used to get handbooks for nurses of skin ailments and things like that. And they say, look, oh, that one's horrible. And they would do big herpes on the valve coming out the top of your head. And you were having to fly on a harness. And these people and the harness people hadn't met till that day on the set. So they strung you up, you got your big thing out the top of your head and your flying harness, and they pulled my head out. I couldn't work for a week. I was damaged. The doctor said, well, he can't work. And so a lot of this flying stuff was done with a stuntman, and all you could see is his feet hanging into shot and stuff like that. I really was quite badly injured, because if you injure this part of you, that can be very serious, and I really didn't think they'd paid it enough attention. And so, you know, I'm only recently remembering these things. I mean, he was lucky just being cut open, weren't he? That was fuck all, I tell you.
Sad red flag, you know.
Any more questions from the... Yes, sir.
What's your favourite Dr. Channard quote?
What's your favourite Dr. Channard quote?
Come up with these for signed photos. I suppose the one I like is, the doctor is in, because I can spell all the words. When they always want evisceration and things like, oh. No, the doctor is in, I'll do fine. Thanks.
I just want to go off in a slightly different direction for a moment. The two of you were both in a horror movie called Tale of a Vampire, many years ago, directed by a Japanese writer-director called Shimako Sato, but also starring Julian Sands, who was with us in Sheffield last year, bless him. I wanted to ask you of your memories of making Tale of a Vampire.
Were you in it as well, Oliver? No. Well, it was just me. I was playing Edgar Allan Poe, who turned out to be a vampire. And I had to recite, "Oh, the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee." And I did all those things. And then it's revealed that he's been made into a vampire, but it was made by a Japanese woman, and it was very artistic. And it didn't get any sort of audience at all, although it had a certain cachet. And I worked with Julian Sands, and he was a sort of outsider to the film industry. And because of him, I met Barry Humphries, who was a friend of his. And if you get to meet Barry Humphries, it's always going to be something you're going to be glad of. You know, he will really make you laugh. So that's a silly answer to the question, but through Julian Sands, I did get to meet Barry Humphries, who talked about on television going to meet Megan's father. Little Tommy Miracle, I'll go and visit him as long as he doesn't open his pajamas. And the people on the television show couldn't stop laughing for the rest of the show. Anyway, thank you, Barry Humphries.
Sorry, another question from the floor, if there is one. Yep, okay, yep.
What were your favourite scenes you filmed in Hellraiser and why?
Well, I loved being with Claire Higgins, partly because I'd seen her on stage and I thought she was extraordinary, and I've always been crazy about Irish girls. It's an affliction, really. They're not like anyone else. And Randy Newman wrote a song called Catholicism Made Easy, And part of the lyric was, I've always been crazy about Irish girls. And I can only go along with that, that's all.
Always tell the truth, and always be yourself. It's my dad taught me.
We're coming to the end. We've only got a few minutes left. I'm just looking at Theo down there. Ken, you worked 3 times with Lawrence Gordon Clark on a couple of TV films with Rob Lowe and on a TV series called Chimera. Lawrence is a pal. I did a book with him. He's best known for his ghost stories for TV, but Chimera is also highly unusual. It's another mad scientist for you. Memories of that one, please, and of working with Lawrence.
Lawrence Gordon Clark, his nickname from Northern Girls on the set was Florence Garden Fork, because he came from a posh background, so they have a little dig at him. But I got some really nice work out of Lawrence, and he's retired now. I mean, you really depend. What happens quite a bit is that certain directors will always try to use you because they like your work, and also it saves them time if they work with people that they know. It's just a bit easier. But we did a thing called, what was that show set in southern Spain? What was that called? With Alfred Molina and John Bird. El Cid. And we did a sequence in that Lawrence was directing. And the actor in it, who was the old character actor, he played his lines, and then they turned round and he dropped dead. Donald, what was his name, the actor? Good character actor, just dropped dead. And I was going to take myself on a journey up to Spain. I had a couple of days off, but I thought, no, I can't go away. I've got to stay with everybody. And he was a Liverpool supporter, and his family came over, and in a bar in Spain, they all sung "You'll Never Walk Alone." And it's one of those things when you're all in isolation on location somewhere and something like that happens. Donald died, and the man who used to give us our expenses. And the Spanish had the same superstition that we had. They said things always happen in threes. So we were really waiting for someone else. But you know, Lawrence Gordon Clark was he put some really nice, interesting things my way. I mean, the things with Rob Lowe were airport books, really. And Rob Lowe's career was on a dip because this video had got back to the parents of a couple of girls he'd taken back to a hotel. And his career went into freefall for a while because the videos got back to the parents of the girls, you know, so he was very scandalous, the whole thing. And so he was travelling with his father alone, who was sort of his minder. And then it revived itself if you waited a little while. And while I was in Broadway, doing a show on Broadway, there was a video that came up for sale on the television, and it had Chuck Berry filming women in the toilet in his restaurant, and Rob Lowe's video from the hotel. And when I worked with Rob Lowe, I regretted not having got hold of the video. I thought I could have made some really nice connections with that one. I was told that one of the things he said to one of these young women was, "What does it feel like to be loved?" Isn't it fun dropping people in it when you're old? It doesn't really matter, does it?
Absolutely correct.
And before any of us get sued, I'll just drop in the word allegedly. As we say in the business, follow that. We've run out of time. I know that we could talk for a long, long time to both of our guests, but we are out of time. So would you give them a big popcorn? Thank you, Mr. Ken Cranham, Mr. Oliver Smith, our guests from Hellraiser.